had wanted to know, particularly Manya, when talking about cross-cultural communications, you mentioned Aboriginal English, and I know that a couple of commentators like Noel Pearson have really opposed such measures and said that it's somehow dropping the standard of English for Aboriginal Australians, which plays into the kind of notions that, you know, they're inferior or whatever, which, you know, I felt a little bit like I could understand that position, but I also didn't think it was entirely fair to not take into account cross-cultural communication. I was just wondering if you had anything to say on that.
Yes, I mean, I don't know Noel, I've never met him, and I don't know what his circumstances of growing up were. But I come from a non-English speaking background, and boy, if I got $1 for every time someone told me I have an accent. Of course I have an accent. It's an Aboriginal accent, because English is not the language of this country, you know. And so when, and I've got a tape when I was 12 years old, and I think I'm speaking English. You know, when I play it back, I just laugh because I thought I was speaking English. But in fact, I was speaking a very strong version of Aboriginal English. So people like myself that have, you know, have come through that process, and it's been very valuable. I can revert to Aboriginal English and speak Aboriginal English, and in that also pick up a number of Creoles around the world, because you understand the, you know, how it all fits and together. But you know, but I hope I speak a decent level of English now, certainly enough to, you know, to be a barrister in the Australian courts and speak English. But I would never have gotten to that if I hadn't spoken Aboriginal English first. And so I see a lot of value in Aboriginal English, and it is a second language. If you're talking about a pidgin, which I think Noel might be thinking about, that's the first contact. If you know anything about sociolinguistics, that's a first contact language. A pidgin develops. Anyone knows where the name pidgin comes from? It was from the English trading with the Chinese, and they were doing business with each other, weren't they? Business, pidgin. You see how it comes? That's where pidgin comes from. So in those early days, they just had those sorts of, you know, words to describe, you know, to be able to exchange some ideas and tools and whatnot. But then the second generation of speakers come along and speak in an Indigenous format, but using the language, whether it's French or whether it's English, whatever, you know, just where the colonial powers went. But they follow Indigenous linguistic strategies, and so I grew up with that. And at one level, yes, I can see his point. Definitely, we want to encourage our people to do well in white society as well. But I don't think it's about getting rid of Aboriginal English. I think it's then bringing in the support, because I taught myself how to speak properly as well. You know, I'd listen to the radio, and I could do some really good accents, you know, because we didn't have TV in the Kimberley, but I'd listen and I'd learn to, because I know I spoke differently, you know, when I was a little 12-year-old, and I was speaking really with a very thick Aboriginal accent then, but I would work on speaking English properly, and that's the best I can do, even with my accent, you know. But he probably didn't have that understanding of it. So, yeah, I certainly support him in terms of where we're going eventually, but I don't think you can discard it.
Stephen's going to hear a lot about this because he's supervising a big essay that I'm writing about this very topic. So I'm giving you a sneak preview of what I'm thinking here, Stephen. This is kind of an observation which I'd like you all to comment on, but you especially, Manya. Looking at ways for the Aboriginal community to find a way forward out of disadvantage and you know, social problems and racism, and get to a place that's more empowered and more self-determined. I think what's been sort of dawning on me through the reading that I've been doing is that the white way of looking at law is just so narrow. And there's reasons why we've gone that way, like the reason why we separated church and state was because so many people were getting killed because they, you know, were all fighting amongst each other, and, you know, we have this sort of bitter history of religious conflict in Europe. And and because people kind of wanted to free themselves from the problems that were happening with the dogmas that were going on and stuff. And we also tend to really, we don't think of law and health together in the same way unless it's regulation of health services. But I think, when I'm looking at what I'm learning about Aboriginal society is that spirituality and law and health and the way people treat each other and the relationships between them, it's all part of a concept of law. And I've been reading a book by Judy Atkinson called Trauma Trails. And what I haven't actually read the whole book yet because I'm madly going through books trying to find the right ones that I should read in more detail, but she puts forward something which I thought was really revelatory, because it's very easy, I think, for people to just throw up their hands in despair and go, oh, the Aboriginal problem is too hard. We don't know what to do about it. And, I guess that's the sort of logic that, makes things like the intervention possible. But she had run a series of workshops that encouraged people through, I think it was, I'm not quite sure if I got the word right, I think it's called Diwari. The Dairy, thank you, where it was like very deep talking and listening between people, where they explored all the trauma that they'd been through, and they put it all together with the history of colonisation and the intergenerational problems and things that they had personally experienced, and it was sort of like making a new songline. It was sort of like making a new story to sort of find a way out. And I was really interested in that because, looking at a way, I don't think it's possible. Like, I think, the thing that really upset me about the intervention was I just thought this is such a step backwards, and it's going to just totally break any trust that people in the Territory, Aboriginal people in the Territory, have in the system. It's just, it's such a sort of violation that I've kind of lost my thread. But I was just really interested in that way of finding a way forward that people need to start with themselves and their community, and if white fella law can't address that, is it possible for it to be supported through healthcare practices? Is it possible to be supported? I mean, we would see it as psychotherapy, that thing, that whole deep talking thing. So I'm sort of, as much as I care about ways to make the law more equitable for Aboriginal people, I sometimes wonder if it's the law that should be put in the too hard basket, white fella law, and the sort of public health approach and the spiritual approach might be more fruitful. What do you think?
Look, I'm very interested in cross-cultural religions and spiritualities, and I draw upon from many sources: Buddhism, Judaism, Catholicism, and I think that there are some wonderful ethical philosophies in many of those spiritualities that can teach us about what it means to be human. And it's not just Indigenous culture. You have the answers within yourselves as well. Many of you will have heard of an Australian painter called Arthur Boyd. And I was watching this documentary on him, and he had done this famous painting of judges, and the interviewer was asking what he thought about Australian law. And he says, geez, wouldn't it be wonderful if we had a legal system that was based on love? Now, that's a very radical idea, isn't it? You can hear the barristers now, and Owen Dixon and others, getting revved up about that nonsense, But I thought, there's something to this. There's something to it, And he had that wonderful capacity to draw the Australian landscape like an Aboriginal person. That I can see spirits within his paintings, and because he had those Dreamtime ears and those Dreamtime eyes. But that has stayed with me as a barrister. What if we had a legal system that was based on love? Geez, wouldn't it be remarkably different from anything that we can imagine? And I don't know if any of you have ever gone to the Koori courts, but go along, because I'm sometimes in there, but it's a marvellous step forward. The magistrate comes down with the Koori elders. There's a circle. Nobody's lording it over the other. And I thought, isn't this a wonderful system? And I know people like there are critics against having Koori courts because they're seen as being racist and treating people differently. But God, some of you guttiers, you white fellas, it'd be great for you too if you had that, had that Koori court too. And if our elders could help guide you and speak to you like they do to our people, would see some changes quick smart, and but yeah, have a system based on love.